Now, as I mentioned at the top of the program, today was International Women's Day, and as usual, there was a fair bit of froth and bubble around, all cupcakes and complaints about gender pay gaps. But there was one event that I thought was terrific. In Canberra, they unveiled statues of Dame Edith Lyons and Dame Dorothy Tangney. These were the first women elected to the House and the Senate, respectively. Lyons, a Liberal, and Tangney from the Labor Party. Wonderful statues near Old Parliament House. That's the way to go. Don't tear down old statues or whinge about nonsense. Instead, just make sure we honour significant women. But in Parliament, we heard again about the much vaunted gender pay gap.
And we introduced, of course, legislation to close the gender pay gap, exposing those industries where over 100 or more workers where gender pay gaps are significant.
Now, this stuff needs to be challenged and debated, not just accepted as fact, but the Coalition, they just went along for the ride.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And on indulgence, I'd like to associate the opposition with the remarks of the Minister representing the Minister for Women.
Oh dear, nobody wants to debate the issues because they're scared of being accused of being anti-women. So let's explore this idea of the gender pay gap with contributing economics editor at The Australian, Judith Sloan. Judith, good to talk to you again. You've written extensively about this over the years. Tell us how you would interpret the gender pay gap, whether it exists or whether it exists in the way it's portrayed to us.
Well, thanks, Chris. Yes, in fact, I spent International Women's Day writing a column about the gender pay gap. No cupcakes around here, sadly. Look, myth is a strong word, but we can explain the gender pay gap. And in fact, the gender pay gap, as was released by that rather insidious sounding agency, the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, released some figures today and told us that it's a tad over 13%. Now that's in terms of comparing full-time male workers' wages with full-time women wages. It's actually, and you won't have read this, the lowest ratio it's ever been. So you think they might have been saying, well, that's a good thing. But the real point is this, and dare I say it, I don't like to think of things being settled because I don't think anything in economic research or any kind of research is fully settled. But we know what affects earnings are things like industry, occupation, qualifications, job tenure. And once you start to model those things and try and explain earnings, basically the gender pay gap disappears. And what you're left with is a kind of small discrepancy. But here's the thing, there's a Harvard academic called Claudia Goldin, and she has established that that final discrepancy is basically because women tend to dislike jobs that have very long hours, that have unpredictable hours, and involve a lot of work travel. And there is a sort of decrement in the labour market if you're not prepared to do those things. So that basically is the story. It fits in well around the world. There's been a similar study done in Sweden about this. Even in Sweden, with all those fabulous pro-women arrangements, long parental leave, free childcare and the like, there is still a gender pay gap because women will try to drive a balance between their family and their work responsibilities.
Yeah, the point about this, and I think you've written about this as well, Judith, but the point is it's not just about women either. These are family decisions, right? Normally, if women are making different choices about their working life and career and perhaps putting their career on hold for a couple of years, men do that too now, of course, if they want to do some home care. But if families make these decisions, and so the income difference is a choice they make. And this really gets me when it comes to the superannuation debate, because people are saying women have less super. Now, sure, there's people who never marry or keep their finances completely separate and their divorces. We understand all that. But typically, a couple will make these decisions together. So what counts actually is the couple's superannuation, not whether the man or the woman has more or less.
Yes, well, I mentioned that in my article because, of course, it's hardly surprising that the superannuation balances of women are lower than those of men because their lifetime earnings in total are less, and superannuation is earnings related. So, you know, it's just sort of arithmetic, right? But as you say, couples make decisions, joint decisions, based on balancing financial and family considerations. And it's absolutely true that men, including you, of course, Chris, do a lot more than like 20, 30, 40 years ago, and are very involved in, the family responsibilities. But the point is that joint decisions are made. But here's the real kicker. Superannuation actually is also a joint asset. So if a couple gets divorced, for example, the courts add up the superannuation accounts of both husband and wife, and they're divided equally.
Yeah, so, spot on. So that they understand that reality.
You know, so
yeah.
You probably remember. You see, John Howard gave serious consideration to joint superannuation accounts. But it was sort of too difficult technically, but he was onto it.
Yeah, and as you say, the court's treated that way anyway. Thanks so much for joining us, Judith. I appreciate it. Look forward to reading that in the Australian tomorrow, and I apologise we had no cupcake for you.